What are you looking for, Mike?
An old truck that works, a 4x. Dodge, Ford. Let's see what you got.
Let's go for a wander.
Rust Valley Restores is a Canadian reality TV show hosted by Mike Hall. The show revolves around the daily activities of Mike and his team collecting and restoring classic cars into collectible vehicles. Mike has a penchant for not letting things go. He puts his heart and soul into every restoration project and almost never backs out. Most times, those projects do not sell as high as he hopes, and he loses a great deal of money on them. Mike's business knowledge has been questioned since he always loses money on his projects. A few months ago, Mike was in the news for wanting to sell his Field of Dreams, a collection of about 500 vintage cars he has owned for 3 to 4 decades. What could be the reason behind his actions? Let's find out what really happened to Mike Hall.
It's all gone. I've spent $2 million. I've got 6 employees. I've got parts bills that are through the roof. I'm hemorrhaging funds. If we don't get some coming in, I'm not in business.
Mike's journey to stardom is laden with ups and downs. He went from being a little-known hippie living in a small town in Canada to becoming a rather well-known hippie living in Tampa, British Columbia, thanks to Rust Valley Restorers. Before hosting the show, Mike went through some interesting character development. At a glance, Mike, with his blonde dreadlocks and build, looks more like a gym instructor than a car enthusiast. Well, appearances can be deceiving because Mike knows just as much about cars as many other car experts. Mike was born and raised in St. Boniface, Canada, and he moved to Kamloops as a kid when his dad got a job with Canadian Pacific Railway. Before Mike got into restoring cars for the show, he owned a slope stabilization business called Chimera Springs Rock Works. This means all the talks about Mike being a bad businessman have no validity since he made a fortune via the slope stabilization business. Basically, Mike's wealth largely came from the construction business. He reinvested a substantial amount into buying old, rusty cars that he fixes and sells for a profit. This accounts for the huge net worth he's reportedly said to have. Mike started his car collection business, which eventually grew into a huge collection of more than 500 vehicles. Keeping over 500 cars might sound absurd to many, but that is pretty normal to a man who lived with his wife and dog on a 26-acre farm. Mike placed all his collection on a 5-acre land near Shuswap Lake to cut costs. Since his wife doesn't share the same obsession with him, he has no choice but to place his cars far away from the family farm. The 5-acre land he got for his cars was where the Netflix show took place. It's important to mention that Rust Valley Restorers wasn't Mike's first foray into show business. Before having a show, he appeared on a reality TV show called Highway Through Hell, which featured rescues of road accidents, where we got to see Mike hang off cliffs and blow stuff up. After his time on the show and with a lot of money from his slope stabilization business, he managed to maneuver himself into a position where he got his own TV show. The show has been a huge success with an excellent IMDb rating. Netflix has released 3 seasons since it began in 2019. Mike is almost getting close to 70 and knows he won't be able to restore all the cars he owns in his lifetime, which is why he's glad his son is part of his show. He even admitted to driving.ca, filming a reality show doesn't make the shop any more productive or efficient. It takes 30% more time, and I make up the difference, but I like to fulfill people's dreams. So far, Mike has managed to make $5 million mostly from construction, while the rest of the equity is in the cars and property he owns. And luckily for him, he has business partners and an accountant who are looking out for him because his obsession and love for old junk cars can sometimes cloud his judgment. This lack of business acumen causes constant pressure on the show and causes some drama, but at the end of the day, Mike Hall is living the dream. Talking about dreams, Mike's dream is to keep buying rust to his name. The Rust Bros is our name because we always buy rust and we love junk. But now it seems Mike doesn't know what to do with his rusty cars anymore, hence why he wants to sell them. But what happened to the famous rust collector? In an old interview with the Globe and Mail, Mike said, "I'll be 62 soon. My dad died at 60. I've seen buddies dying or running into health problems, leaving their families with all kinds of stuff to deal with. What are my wife and kids going to do with 500 cars in a field? Basically, I have mixed feelings about bidding my collection goodbye. I know it's going to simplify my life. It's really sad that they're all going to go, but if they go to good homes and somebody does something with them, then I've done my job. Because a lot of these cars wouldn't be here if I hadn't been hoarding them the last 30 to 40 years. A few years after his interview, Mike tried to sell his junk cars and 5-acre land for $1.16 million in 2016, but no one was ready to meet his asking price. As a business-oriented person, Mike canceled the sale and waited till the following years to raise the price rather than dropping the price. Played some reverse psychology on buyers and listed it at $1.45 million. This new price caught the attention of Mayhem Entertainment, who felt producing a show about what Mike and his crew did on a daily basis would be interesting to viewers. What started as a dream to restore over 500 cars to their former glory has now dwindled to just 40. Yes, you heard that right. The Rust Valley Restorer star auctioned his rusty collection and sold almost all of his cars. Mike always used one of his friends who died as a reference. His friend, who was also a junk collector, died, leaving his wife with his collections. His wife, who knows nothing about the business, sold off the collection cheaply. Mike didn't want a scenario like this to happen, so he auctioned the cars himself. In an interview after the auction, Mike announced that he sold all the cars he listed for auction, took an ass-whooping loss on some, and some went for way more than he expected. So, on the aggregate, he made a reasonable profit. This is coming after people refused to buy his cars when he asked for $1.16 million in 2016. Mike sold about $250,000 to $260,000 worth of projects to people who could deal with them and kept some of his favorites. He kept all his 1970 Dodge Super Bs and some Chevys, including a 64 Malibu SS 4-speed convertible he's had for 30 years and a Buick GS 4-speed he's had for 40 years more. After a record sale of some of his cars, Mike revealed that his cars fit perfectly in one yard for the first time. He plans to give the business to his son Connor Hall, who's also a star on the show. In what seems like preparation for his demise, Mike has been training his son to take over his position in the shop. However, Connor Hall isn't a fan of junk cars like his father. He and Avery Shove, his father's best buddy, are always helping Mike keep his head straight whenever he wants to make a financial mistake. Left with just 40 cars, Mike believes his family wouldn't feel bad when he's no more. He said his family could deal with the burden of 40 cars, unlike when he had over 500 cars. With the looks of things, it seems Mike is planning on moving on to something else, as the sales of his cars might hinder his restoration spirit. Mike isn't buying junk as he used to anymore. He's patiently waiting for his son to take over his business and hopefully keep his hobbies alive. There are no talks about Rust Valley Restorer's renewal, and Mike is using this period to do some little work on his farm. The show's fans are anxiously waiting for his 5th season of the show, which doesn't seem possible right now.